Ever since human beings became conscious, they've carried a ghost: fear. Not the biological fear that keeps an animal alive in front of a predator, but that psychological fear, that silent terror that paralyzes you, that whispers in your ear that you're not capable, that the world out there will devour you, that it's better to stay small, invisible, safe in your comfort zone. But here is the brutal truth society doesn't want you to know. Fear, as you experience it, is an illusion, a sophisticated construction of your mind to keep you trapped, controlled, domesticated. The fear that paralyzes you before a difficult conversation, the fear that keeps you from taking risks, the fear that turns you into a spectator of your own life, that fear is not real. It's a shadow projected onto the wall of the cave, and you're chained, watching the show. Nietzsche understood this deeply when he wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The German philosopher knew that fear thrives in existential emptiness, in a life without purpose, in reactive existence. Fear is the symptom, not the disease. The disease is mental cowardice, the refusal to confront the raw reality of your own freedom. Throughout this video, we are going to systematically deconstruct this illusion. We'll dive into the minds of Seneca, Sartre, Jung, Kierkegaard, Marcus Aurelius, and Nietzsche to extract 7 techniques the great thinkers used to turn fear from a prison into fuel. Don't expect comforting words, expect a brutal mirror that will reflect the truth you've been avoiding. You don't need courage to act. You need to recognize that fear is a fraud, and then act in spite of it, or better yet, through it. Technique 1. The Socratic deconstruction of fear. Fear cannot withstand interrogation. Socrates revolutionized philosophy with a simple yet brutal method. Question everything until you reach the essence. When we apply the Socratic method to fear, it collapses like a house of cards. Why? Because fear lives off generalization, catastrophizing, vague apocalyptic narratives that we never submit to the test of reality. Fear operates through imprecise language. I'm afraid of failing. But what exactly is failing? Losing money? Feeling ashamed? Not reaching an arbitrary goal you yourself defined? When you force fear to become specific, it loses power. Generalized anxiety is paralyzing. A specific problem is just a problem to be solved. When Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth, his friends prepared his escape. He had every reason to be afraid, and imminent execution is as specific a fear as you can get. But in the dialogue Phaedo, Plato recounted that Socrates spent his final hours systematically questioning the fear of death. What is death if not the separation of the soul from the body? And if the soul is immortal, then death is merely a transition. And if there is nothing after, then there is no sensation, therefore no suffering. He turned existential terror into a logical exercise. Are you afraid of being rejected in public? Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? That people will laugh? And then, that they'll judge me? For how long? A week? A day? An hour? When you do this, you realize something disturbing. Most of your fears have no concrete consequences beyond a temporary feeling of emotional discomfort. And you are sacrificing years of potential because you're afraid of feeling uncomfortable for a few hours? The arsenal. Tonight, take your biggest current fear and submit it to Socratic interrogation. Write on paper, what exactly am I afraid of? And keep asking, and then what, to each answer until you reach the logical conclusion. You'll discover that 90% of your fears have no foundation when confronted with cold logic. Technique 2. Stoic preparation. Premeditatio malorum. Anticipate the worst and it loses its power to surprise you. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who was advisor to Emperor Nero, developed a technique that seems counterintuitive but is brutally effective: premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of evils. It is not pessimism, it is psychological engineering. Fear feeds on uncertainty. Your mind loops, trying to predict all possible scenarios, consuming massive cognitive energy. Instead of fighting this impulse, Seneca proposed, go all the way. Imagine the worst-case scenario in vivid detail. Not vague and catastrophic, but specific and realistic. What you'll discover is liberating. Even the worst case is survivable. In Letters to Lucilius, Seneca writes, "Practice poverty in the midst of wealth." He would periodically live as if he had lost everything. Eat simple food, sleep on a hard bed, wear basic clothes. Why? To realize that the fall would not be as devastating as his mind feared. When Nero finally condemned him to death years later, Seneca faced forced suicide with philosophical tranquility. He had already died 1,000 times in his mind. Are you afraid of losing your job? Do the exercise. What would the realistic worst-case scenario be? You'd be unemployed for 3 months, you'd have to cut expenses, ask for help, and after that, you'd recover, you'd find another job, you'd survive. The act of confronting the worst-case scenario specifically transforms amorphous fear into a logistical problem. The arsenal. Choose a situation that terrifies you and write a contingency plan for the worst-case scenario. Be specific. If X happens, I will do Y and Z. When your mind realizes that even the worst case has a plan B, it relaxes. The fear is not of what may happen, it is of the feeling of powerlessness in the face of the unknown. Technique 3. Sartre's unmasking of bad faith. Fear is often an excuse not to assume your freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist, introduced a devastatingly honest concept, mauvaise foi, or bad faith. It is the art of lying to yourself, of using fear as an alibi so you don't have to make hard choices. In Being and Nothingness, Sartre argues that the human being is condemned to be free. We have no excuses. Every inaction is a choice. But this freedom is terrifying, so we create narratives to rid ourselves of responsibility. I can't do this because I'm afraid. The brutal truth? You can. You simply choose not to, and you use fear as a convenient story to hide the choice. Sartre describes the example of a waiter who plays the role of the perfect waiter, exaggerated movements, excessive formality. Why? Because he is in bad faith, fleeing from the reality that he is free to be something other than a waiter. The role is comfortable because it removes the anguish of freedom. Similarly, when you say, "I'm afraid to try," you are actually choosing the comfort of inertia and using fear as a convenient narrative. How many times have you said, "I'm afraid of failing," when the truth was, "I don't want to face the discomfort of trying"? Or, "I'm afraid of rejection," when it was, "I'd rather keep the illusion of untested potential than face the reality of being tested"? Sartre is telling you, you are not a victim of your fear, you are complicit. And that is both scary and liberating, because if you are choosing, you can choose differently. The arsenal. When you feel paralyzing fear, ask the Sartrean question, am I genuinely being prevented, or am I using fear as an excuse to avoid the responsibility of choosing? If it's the latter, acknowledge, I could do this, I'm choosing not to, and this choice has consequences that I will accept. Brutal honesty breaks the cycle. Technique 4. Jungian confrontation with the shadow. The fear you avoid is the power you reject. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who broke with Freud, discovered something fundamental. We're afraid not only of what is outside, but of what's inside. The shadow, the part of ourselves we reject, deny, repress. Jung realized that many of our external fears are projections of internal aspects we do not accept. Are you afraid of confrontation? Maybe because you repressed your own aggressiveness and now fear it when you see it in the world. Do you fear being vulnerable? Because you rejected the part of you that feels, that needs, that is human. The shadow does not disappear when ignored. It grows, distorts, and comes back as a rational fear. Jung recounts in memories, dreams, reflections, a personal experience in which he confronted terrifying visions during his confrontations with the unconscious. He saw dark figures, violent impulses, aspects of himself he considered monstrous. Instead of running away, he dialogued with these images, accepted them as legitimate parts of his psyche. The result? Integration. Fear turned into self-knowledge and eventually into creative power. If you have intense fear of something specific, ask yourself, what part of me am I refusing to acknowledge? Fear of being selfish may mean you repressed your ability to defend your own interests. Fear of failure may indicate that you built an identity based on potential and dread discovering your real limits. The arsenal. Identify a recurring fear. Now complete. This fear exists because I'm afraid to recognize that I am or that I have. Whatever answer comes up, no matter how disturbing, is the key. You don't need to eliminate that part. You need to integrate it, accept it as yours. Up to this point, we have deconstructed fear intellectually. We have questioned its logic with Socrates, prepared for the worst with Seneca, unmasked our bad faith with Sartre, and confronted our shadow with Jung. These are the foundations. But now we enter more dangerous and more powerful territory. It's no longer about understanding fear. It's about turning it into a weapon. The next 3 techniques are not for those who just want to feel better. They are for those who want to transmute fear into something most people never dare to pursue: will, authenticity, and relentless action. If the first 4 techniques free you from fear, the next 3 teach you how to use it as fuel. Get ready. Technique 5. The will to power, using fear as Nietzschean fuel. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger, but only if I choose to be strengthened. Nietzsche was not naive about fear. He knew life is saturated with it, but he proposed something radical. What if fear were not an enemy to be eliminated, but necessary resistance for growth? The will to power, Nietzsche's central concept, is not the desire to dominate others, but to overcome oneself through resistance. In The Gay Science, Nietzsche writes, "The formula of my happiness, a yes, a no, a straight line, a goal." Fear is the no against which you affirm your yes. Without fear, without resistance, without obstacle, there is no possibility of self-overcoming. Muscles grow under tension. Courage only exists when there is fear to be transcended. Nietzsche proposes celebrate fear as proof that you are on the right path, at the edge of your potential. Nietzsche himself was tormented by physical illness, social isolation, and intellectual rejection. He had every reason to fear failure, irrelevance, and death in obscurity. Instead of succumbing, he wrote, "You have your way, I have mine. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist." And also, "I turn everything I suffer and everything that is difficult for me into light and flame." He used existential fear as raw material to create philosophy that would change the world, even if only decades after his death. When you feel fear in front of a challenge, mentally reframe it. This is my gym. This fear is the weight that will make me stronger. Don't seek comfort. Seek what Nietzsche called
Amor fati, love of fate, including its difficulties. Fear signals growth. Absence of fear signals stagnation. The arsenal. Identify the most terrifying thing you could do next week within ethical and legal limits. Now make it your goal. Not because you feel like it, but because fear is the indicator that crossing that line will transform you. Nietzsche asks, do you want to be comfortable or do you want to become?
Technique 6. Productive anxiety. Kierkegaard's portal to authenticity. Anxiety is the price of authentic freedom. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher considered the father of existentialism, had a counterintuitive view. Anxiety is not the problem. It is a sign that you are living authentically. More than that, it is the portal to true existence. In The Concept of Anxiety, Kierkegaard distinguishes between fear of something specific and anxiety before nothingness, before pure possibility. When you feel anxious for no apparent reason, it is not pathology, it is your psyche recognizing the vertigo of absolute freedom. You can be anything, do anything. This infinite possibility is terrifying. Most people flee from it into predetermined lives, safe social roles. Kierkegaard says, don't run, step into it. Kierkegaard lived torn by existential anxiety. He broke off an engagement society expected him to honor. He rejected the comfortable life of a Lutheran pastor. He chose intellectual solitude. In his journals, he writes of nights of anxiety so intense he could barely breathe. But he understood that anxiety was the price of refusing to live in bad faith, of refusing to play a social role. It was proof that he was making authentic, not comfortable, choices. If you feel constant anxiety with no apparent reason, Kierkegaard would tell you, perhaps the reason is that you are living the life you're supposed to live, not the one that is truly yours. Anxiety is the alarm of authenticity. It appears when there is a deep mismatch between who you are and who you are performing to be. Don't medicate anxiety away before you investigate its message. The arsenal. When the next wave of anxiety comes, instead of fighting it, ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What authentic choice am I avoiding? Anxiety can be a compass. It points toward the direction of the unlived life, the unrealized potential, the truth left unsaid. Technique 7. The discipline of immediate action. Marcus Aurelius and the absolute present. The principle. Fear lives in the future. Action lives in the present. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and Stoic philosopher, faced plagues, wars, betrayals, and the constant possibility of violent death. His meditations are not abstract theory, they are psychological survival techniques forged under the extreme pressure of imperial leadership. Fear is always temporal projection. You are not afraid now, you are afraid of what may happen. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." The technique is simple, yet devastatingly effective. Cut the timeline. There is only this moment, this action, this step. During the military campaign against the Marcomanni, Marcus Aurelius faced not only external enemies, but disease within his troops, conspiracies in the Senate, and the pressure of holding together a collapsing empire. Any projection into the future would be paralyzing. So many variables, so many catastrophic possibilities. So he focused on the absolute present. In meditations, he reminds himself, perform every act of your life as though it were the last. Not as pessimism, but as radical focus on the now. When fear paralyzes you, don't ask, what if this goes wrong? Ask, what is the next concrete action I can take in the next 60 seconds? Send an email, make a phone call, write the first line. Fear cannot withstand immediate action because action is present and fear is future. When you act, even minimally, fear loses its grip. The arsenal. Implement the 5-second rule. When something appears that you are afraid to do, count backward 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and act immediately before your mind rationalizes paralysis. Marcus Aurelius taught that you don't need courage for your whole life, only for the next step, then the next, then the next. A sequence of absolute presence eliminates the future where fear lives. We have reached the end of this brutal deconstruction of fear. 7 techniques not to make you feel better, but to make you see more clearly. Because this is the final truth all these philosophers share. Fear is not the problem. Illusion is the problem. You spent your life believing you needed to eliminate fear in order to act. Socrates showed you that fear collapses under interrogation. Seneca taught you to strip the worst-case scenario of its power through preparation. Sartre forced you to admit that you're in bad faith, using fear as an excuse. Jung revealed that you fear what you repress in yourself. Nietzsche turned fear into fuel for self-overcoming. Kierkegaard showed that anxiety is the portal to authenticity. And Marcus Aurelius brought you back to the only place where action is possible, the absolute present. But here is the final test, the only one that matters. What are you going to do with this? Because you can watch this video, feel a momentary insight, and then go back to the cycle of mental cowardice. You can use all of this as yet more interesting theory to accumulate. Or you can do what the philosophers did, turn knowledge into practice, insight into action, theory into life. Nietzsche was right when he wrote, "Some are born posthumously." These philosophers lived lives often tormented, rejected, misunderstood, but they chose authenticity over comfort, truth over approval, action over paralysis. Fear is an illusion, but the life you've wasted because of it is real. The opportunities you let slip are real. The unrealized potential is real. The choice before you now is the simplest and the hardest. Will you continue being an accomplice to the illusion, or will you finally act in spite of it? The philosophers have already given you the tools. Now the only question left is, do you have the courage to use them?